Welcome again. Welcome to the channel. So I was telling this young lady, she's actually like a millennial, right? So I was telling her, AI. I said, you use AI. I say, yes, now we use AI. And I've been privileged to be part of the conference on AI in academic education. And it was such a mind-opening conference whereby we were looking at how AI is being used in different fields of training, teaching and learning, and what are the pros and the cons, what are the reservations, how do we deal with the fears? So it's like at every stage of new technological advancement, there's this fear, oh, they're taking over our work. Africa doesn't need AI. Africa doesn't need robots. Africa doesn't even need technology. We can keep on. We've got the population. We've got labor. There'll be lots of jobs and all that. So once again, the concern of AI in education has also come up, and in higher education, I do lecture at the university. And then in higher education, there's also the concerns, of how students would use AI. But there's also the privilege or the benefits of teachers, lecturers using AI in trying to communicate with their students. So it's got a bit of back and forth, and how do we deal with it? I think that's the point we are now, where we now need to develop new policies on AI in education. And in my case, I was specifically looking at how we can use AI in research, not just research, but in research driven architecture design studio. So, how does that play out? How do we see it developing? What are the expectations? What are the constraints? What are the disadvantages that you may have? What is even the impact of using AI or introducing AI, generative AI for that matter, in the process of a research driven design studio? So what do I mean by research driven design studio? This would talk to how the creatives, in architecture, we are part of the creatives in the built environment, how you would apply your thought process, how you'd apply findings, how you take those findings from just being narrative into the built environment. And this can be quite a daunting experience, because again, we see the built environment as something that we can read. It's one of my research focuses. How do we read the built environment? How do we perceive it? So if you're driving from Alexandra Township in Johannesburg, you drive through Sonning Hill, and then you drive through Rivonia up into Santon, you can see the change in the character of the environment and how you experience it. In one area, you may feel very safe. In another area, you may feel not so safe. One area you feel the affluence, another area you may feel the lack, the poverty that may be there, the whole character. Some places, for some reason, people feel free throwing things on the floor. In another area, it's like you just keep your to yourself. So sometimes it's really about how those built environments are designed and how they communicate to those going through it. And so this idea of using generative AI in helping out in that has come into discussions once again. How do we get into the ethical use of AI? Where do we draw the lines? How do we avoid plagiarism when it comes to doing literature reviews, literature search? How do you even acknowledge? How do you know or verify sources where AI is pulling in information from? For instance, if you use ChatGPT, how do you know where that information is coming from? And to what extent is the researcher to verify these kind of sources? So something that was quite exciting about is that we are all aware that AI is more or less here to stay. But we're also aware that it is something that is still developing. So AI, or generative AI, for instance, ChatGPT is just pulling in data. It's pulling in data that is already out there. So any data that is not out there, ChatGPT cannot pull on it. For instance, data about water sources in my my husband's village in Iwoye Ijesha. AI cannot pull out that kind of information because that information has not been uploaded onto the platforms. Or the impact of malaria, and even how it's spreading in very rural communities in northern Nigeria or in Mozambique, for instance. If that information hasn't been put out there, AI cannot pull on it. So there is a limit to the amount or to the authenticity of data that AI can pull on. And then another thing that struck me during that conference and the rubbing of minds, we had delegates from all over the world actually, was that generative AI, such as ChatGPT, is actually a pre-trained kind of platform on which you can pull data in from. So I had to ask, what does GPT actually mean? And GPT it's a generative pre-trained technology based on some kind of set data that has already come in. And that is where you will now have issues of machine learning coming in. How do we train this machine? How do we train this transmitter, this technology to understand the kind of feedback that is expected? So that's a new place. I mean, that's a place where we would now start having more research needs to be done in it so that we can have bigger ideas about bots. I mean, we heard so much about tech bots. We're doing all these transmitters, robots. People are coming up with different names and even giving these GPTs names. So there's Jenny AI. I've got a friend who uses that very proudly because her name is Jen. So she's like Jen AI. Then you have Claude. Who is Claude? Oh, I'm talking to Claude. I use Claude. And if you are not familiar with these terms, you may actually think Claude is a person, which is where the robot mind or the transmitting mind comes in. But it's all an artificial transmission. So the whole idea of the ethics behind using GPTs, the ethics behind using AI in research, even in design. I mean, at the design level, we could use it in generating new images by implanting or imprinting on the technology the kind of impact when it comes to climate change or facades or even sustainability or temperature control, solar radiation or transmission, so you can use it in so many ways, but it needs the programmer to fully understand what the GPT is all about. If you don't understand it, you just use it and assume that the information is giving you is the correct thing. And then that is where it would lack the critical thinking of the human mind. So yes, we would use it, but we have to be in control of it. We cannot allow GPTs or AI to take over the position of the reflective mind of the human being. And so I think, yes, we engage with it. We need to understand it. We need to understand the basics of programming. We need to understand the basics of prompting. And I would advise anybody who is skeptical about it to actually go and read more about it. Go on to LinkedIn, for instance, and do programs on prompting for AI platforms, prompting for GPTs, prompting for using this kind of artificial intelligence, and you would get so much information. Another disadvantage I've found in using it is that you can come to a point where you have information overload. So that when you now put in a prompt, a very good prompt, you've tested, you've reflected, you've re-asked the question, and then the GPT, the AI, is giving you information, you can actually get to a point where you now have to sit down and analyze all the information, clean it up, check it, test it, iterate it back to the AI, and clarify many of the fundamentals that may be required in your research project. So it is something that I think we should all be excited about. I think it's something that would help us even project what the future will be. We can do great research using AI and the GPTs, but I think we really need to understand how it works. What is the basis of it? Where is it getting its data from? And then consciously test it, check it, verify the information that you're getting. Because it's like asking your grandmother, Grandma, when was the first robot built? Hmm. Grandma may tell you something, but you have to go and verify it because she may not be fully aware. Right. So thanks for joining. Please like, share, comment, and stay well. Bye.